The story of France's rapid collapse in the Second World War reads like a cautionary tale whispered through the ages, a brutal reminder that greatness, once achieved, is never guaranteed. Pundits and armchair generals alike have often reduced the fall of France to a punchline, a dramatic contrast to the glory days of Napoleon. Yet to truly grasp how France, home to one of Europe's largest armies, could fall so swiftly to Hitler's forces in 1940, we must dive deep, far beyond the broken trenches and shattered cities, into the tangled roots of doctrine, leadership, and national psyche. When Adolf Hitler unleashed his armies upon France, much of the world expected to see a fierce, drawn-out struggle reminiscent of World War I. After all, France had been one of the victors that last time. Its population, though scarred by the horrors of trench warfare, still remembered those final, hard-fought victories against the Kaiser's armies. Its generals, now wizened and cautious, wore the creased uniforms and earlier warlike armor. They led one of the fastest armies in Europe. On paper, France even had more tanks and artillery than Germany. But the strength of a military, as Sun Tzu reminds us, is never found in numbers alone. Knowledge of one's own abilities, of the enemy's intent, is what turns soldiers and machines into an effective fighting force. This is where the first seeds of disaster were sown for France. In the years leading up to 1940, French military thinking was dominated by a profound sense of caution, born from the trauma of the First World War. The Maginot Line, a symbol of this mindset, stretched along France's eastern border, an immense chain of fortresses, bunkers, and underground barracks that was meant to stop any German invasion in its tracks. It was a marvel of engineering and a monument to the belief that defense, static, formidable, and unyielding, would hold where bravery and sacrifice had paid such a high price before. Officers spoke in terms of methodical battle, no more reckless charges, no more uncalculated risk. Commanders would control every movement, every counterattack, every barrage from central headquarters. In theory, this prevented chaos. In practice, it bred paralysis. When Hitler's armies struck, French units waited for orders that never came, or arrived too late. Modern warfare had become a game of speed, and speed was what France lacked most. Then came a fatal misreading of the enemy, a blindness perhaps even more damning than doctrinal inflexibility. In January 1940, the so-called Mechelin incident heightened French confidence in their old assumptions. A downed German plane seemed to confirm that an invasion would sweep through Belgium, just as it had in 1914. French generals doubled down, believing that by racing into Belgium, they could stall the Nazi tide. Yet this belief, once it became doctrine, gave the Germans every advantage. It left vast sectors, the dense, supposedly impassable Ardennes forest, lightly defended and vulnerable to the unthinkable. German planners, and especially General Erich von Manstein, saw the opportunity. The plan, dubbed Sichelschnitt, or the sickle cut, would send Germany's tanks not charging straight at the Maginot Line, nor marching through the Belgian plains, but instead secretly through the twisting roads of the Ardennes. It was a maneuver so audacious that the French all but dismissed its possibility. The forests, they believed, would swallow any armored column whole. Even as intelligence reports warned of Wehrmacht units assembling near the forest, as pilots reported unusual activity, these warnings never fueled a change in strategy. Confidence in the old way blinded the generals to the new threat building right beneath their noses. When Hitler unleashed the attack in May, the surprise was total. German tanks and trucks churned ahead in endless columns, forcing a path where none was thought possible. The speed of their advance was matched only by the confusion and fear it sowed among French units. Messages failed to travel, orders were delayed or lost outright. French soldiers, told to dig in and wait, watched as the enemy materialized out of the fog and surged past their positions. Ironically, France did possess moments of tactical brilliance and courage. The Char B-1 and other French tanks were heavily armored and could stand toe-to-toe with most German models, but the French, hampered by outdated doctrine, spread their armored forces thin, dividing them among infantry units, to support defense, rather than marshalling them for powerful, coordinated counterattacks. When tanks did strike back, like at the Battle of Stone, they showed momentary flashes of heroism and even blunted German advances. But without air support, with scattered command, and facing the relentless coordination of blitzkrieg, these efforts were doomed to temporary success at best. Underlying all this was a communications crisis. French commanders, fearing interception by German listening posts, avoided using radios. Instead, they sent messengers through contested ground, or relied on phone lines often cut within hours of contact. As a result, when battles erupted on the front, those at headquarters often had little accurate knowledge of what was happening. The pace of the battlefield soared out of all proportion to the general's ability to react. Even as German troops poured across the Meuse River at Sedan, breaking a line the French considered nearly impregnable, it took hours, sometimes longer, for this disaster to reach those empowered to act. But perhaps the most decisive weakness revealed in France's darkest hour was a crisis of leadership. The centralization of power meant that only a handful of high officers, many decades removed from the lightning pace of modern combat, could make decisions. General Gamelin, France's supreme commander, was by all accounts intelligent and experienced, but he was also indecisive and slow to adapt. As news from the front grew worse and worse, he struggled to formulate responses, issuing orders that reflected a battlefield situation that had already changed. The persistent refusal to build a strategic reserve, to heed the warnings coming from intelligence officers, or to give field commanders the freedom to improvise left even brave, talented leaders on the ground trapped by bureaucracy. By the time Gamelin was dismissed and replaced with the 73-year-old General Weygand, the battle was already lost. In government, the split between Prime Minister Reynaud, who wanted to resist, and his opponents deepened daily. As the situation deteriorated, the specter of civil unrest haunted the corridors of power. Defeat in the field was compounded by psychological collapse in the capital. As German tanks approached Paris, even rumors of communist uprisings unnerved politicians. In June, when Marshal Philippe Pétain took power, he swiftly pursued an armistice, hoping collaboration would salvage something of France's dignity and save its people further suffering. In the space of 6 weeks, one of the world's greatest armies had not just lost a series of battles, it had lost its nerve, its cohesion, and its vision. On June 27, 1940, with the signing of the armistice, it appeared as if a long, proud era in military history had ended in humiliation and ashes. And yet, buried within this tragic saga are important lessons. Though often scorned, countless French soldiers did fight bravely against overwhelming odds and impossible circumstances. Their defeat was not simply a matter of cowardice or incompetence, but the cumulative effect of stifling doctrine, outmoded thinking, missed opportunities, and a leadership paralyzed when daring action was most needed. The German blitzkrieg would prove conquerable, later by the Soviets and the British, when met with resilient, adaptive defense and inspired leadership. France's agony in 1940 is, above all, a warning echoed across time. That greatness in war depends not just on what you have, but on how swiftly you can learn, adapt, lead, and, if need be, reimagine it what victory requires. In the end, the tragedy is not merely that France lost a war, but rather that it had lost the belief, the flexibility, and the spirit to win even before the first shot was fired. The echoes of 1940, grim as they are, challenge every nation and every generation to ask, are we preparing for the next challenge, or merely for the last one?